Hi Instagrammers, hi Facebookers, hi YouTubers, how are you? Now I'm going to kind of whisper and be a bit quiet because it's like 1:30 in the morning and I don't want to be loud to annoy my neighbours. Hang on, let me just adjust this. Is that better? No, I want to bring that down a bit. Bear with. There we go, that's better. The right to protest. Well, as if you are watching this abroad or you are in this country and wondering what the hell is going on, it would appear that we do have the right to protest in the word, in the sentence. But do we really? Now, the coronation showed that 7 days beforehand, the Tories pushed through legislation that was a new policing criminal order act, public order act. It was rushed through in 7 days to coincide with the coronation because a lot of people thought there was going to be disruption at the coronation, and it's very draconian if you look at the legislation. I'm not going to go into details here, but as you are aware, if you've watched the news and stuff, it is very draconian. Now, the police now have fast-reaching powers. They first had the Public Order Act, Criminal Justice Act 1986. In 86, that gave them a wide variety of powers, which they put into effect when they smashed the hippies eventually in 87. Then they introduced the Criminal Justice Bill in 1993, which was to destroy the rave culture, the party culture in Britain that was going to raves and nightclubs. And now in the last year, they've introduced two pieces of legislation: the Courts and Sentencing and Justice Bill and this new Criminal Justice Bill and Policing Bill. And the powers that they now have are so varied and wide, and the interpretation they can bring to bear is so wide and varied that they can crack down on any protest they don't like the look of. Now, we're not in the situation where we are in Russia, where you need a license to have a protest. You have to go to the authorities and apply for a license and all the rest of it. We're not quite there yet, but we are kind of there policing wise, in the sense that if they wanted to, if you just rocked up somewhere and started doing a protest, the police can just come over and go, oh look, you got a bicycle, oh look, you got a lock for your bicycle, right, we're taking you equipped. Oh, you're making a lot of noise, you're disturbing the local people, go away, stop protesting. Their powers are so wide-arching that they can interpret any situation to just stop the protest. Now, a lot of people have said they've introduced this legislation because of people like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and their protests. But to be perfectly honest with you, anybody who's got an idea of the law and policing knows that the police have the powers to shut those protests down if they want to. If the police really wanted to, they could stop Extinction Rebellion slow marching up a road. They could just arrest them all. The police have that power under the Highways Act and legislation from the 19th century. They have the powers to stop on the road and demand your ID, where you're going, everything. Especially if you're in charge of a motor vehicle, you can't obstruct the highway. So if the police wanted to, they could crack down on it. Why they don't? Maybe they want more powers and they need an excuse. I don't know, but it just seems to me that every time the police turn around and say, oh, we can't do this, we need more powers, the government, Tories, fall over themselves to give them that legislation and those powers, and then the police just rub their hands and go, right, goody. So what was the protest over the coronation? Well, there weren't any protests over the coronation. There were protests in the sense that they were small groups of demonstrations along the line, just with banners and placards, but that was it. Most of the people out on the Mall and in London that day were going to celebrate the coronation. You wouldn't have noticed the protesters, really. A lot of people didn't. But there were some Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil protesters, and they were just at the side of the road holding up signs. But a lot of them were arrested for wearing T-shirts that said Stop Oil on it. They weren't involved in them. There was just one individual this happened to. They weren't involved in a mass protest. It's just them on their own with a Stop Oil T-shirt, and they were lifted. for that. A journalist was arrested also for filming a Just Stop Oil, I believe it was a Just Stop Oil protester being arrested and lifted by the police. He was then lifted for filming it. Oh, God. And then there was the Republican demonstrators from Republic. They had organised for the last year or so, since the King came to the throne, that they were going to hold a protest at the coronation. They were going to do this, they were going to do that. Can we please liaise with the police? Oh yes, we're liaising with the police. This will be a peaceful protest. We will just be up here. We won't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And they thought they had permission of the police, and it was an all-goer. The next thing they know, as their vans are unloading their placards and stuff, the police jump them and lift a load of them. Why? You had organised it with them. That's almost like entrapment. That is almost entrapment, to set them up to know where they were going to be, how many people were going to be there, and what they would be carrying, and then on the basis of that, lift a number of them. I'm not a Republican, but they have the right to protest, especially at the coronation. What's the point of turning up for no royal occasions to talk about being a republic if you can't protest at royal occasions? The king is not divine. We do not live in the early part of the 17th century anymore. They should have that right to protest, but they didn't. They were lifted. Some of them stayed and were able to carry out their protests quietly, but the main bulk, a lot of them were just lifted for no reason. So in total, about 64 people were arrested that day. And they were all released, and all the charges, no charges pending, everyone's fine. Nothing to see here, move along. What a joke. And all because of the powers that the new legislation that the Tories pushed through 7 days before the coronation has just laid waste to any pretence in this country that there is a modicum of protest. So it means me as a trans woman, if anything takes me against my community, say the BBC do a hit piece again on us, and a number of us in the community in Southampton get together and think we should do a protest outside the BBC offices in Havelock Road, and we all go up there. The police could turn up and go, "You're being disorderly." They don't need an excuse. They can just say, "You're being disorderly, you're being noisy, bugger off, or you're getting nicked." Whereas before the legislations that were passed, the police had a modicum of discretion, and you could get away with having a protest there. Things like Trans Pride Brighton are not actual pride parades in the sense of a pride, but they are a protest. That's how they get away with doing the march they do along the seafront. The police now could just lift anybody in that crowd if they wanted to, for any particular reason. They're not going to, because the optics of that are appalling, but they could if it got that far. And this is where it affects me more than anything. It takes away my right to protest in a time when myself and my community that I'm a member of are just trashing us, and we have no recourse to anything. Recently there has been a video posted that's done the tours on right-wing media of what appears to be a trans woman having a go at a customer in Starbucks in Southampton, trying to get the customer to use the correct pronouns. That's as far as I'm aware of what's going on. I haven't seen the video or anything, but stuff like that, where you can't even say to someone, "Look, please stop treating me like shit." You can't do that anymore. You lose your job. Or if you do it in a protest, you get lifted. So, do we have the right to protest in this country? Kinda. If the police want you to. If the police feel inclined that day to let you, they will. Unless, of course, the government phones them up and says, "Don't do that." You know, Braverman's on the phone saying, "Oi, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, I want you to do this." There's a lot of that going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to, but it's aware that it's going on. The whole of the coronation protests show that the government at the Home Secretary level, basically the Home Secretary level at the bare minimum, was telling the Commissioner of the Police how to police that protest. And the police were going ahead with, where we were given carte blanche to do what they want. So many people were stopped and arrested. It was ridiculous. It's just like for wearing a t-shirt. Now, Labour isn't going to repeal the legislation, well, at least not according to David Lammy, the Shadow Home Secretary. They're not going to come into office and repeal Tory legislation. If you know anything about the consensus in British politics, you'll know that governments coming into office do not change legislation that previous administrations have imposed on the country, as it were. So the law's not going to change. They may amend it, but they haven't said that, and they probably won't, because it benefits them if anything kicked off against them. A little side note, Labour released a number of policies today. Votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, nationalisation of the railways. Those two policies alone are kind of worth voting for Labour. They didn't say anything about nationalising the water companies. And they're also not talking about not going into coalition with any other party if it's a hung parliament or a minority government. It's just a side note. But that's the problem we face in this country now. The Tories have changed it into such a kind of authoritarian nightmare, in the sense that you're not sure what you can get away with now. So it's just best not to do anything, isn't it? Just go away. What can you say? Can't say anything, because you're not allowed to. So yes, do we have the right to protest in this country? Only if the police and the government think you can. If they don't want you to, you won't. And you'll either have to kick up a big fuss and start a riot, or you'll have to go peacefully back to your houses and nothing to see here, move along please. That's the problem we face in this country. We are having draconian legislation passed against the people to stop them from getting to a point where they can stop the government and the country from functioning. I mean, if it just takes a few dozen XL protesters to march up the road and it shuts down half of London, you can see how effective it can be. Get out of your car. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you all again soon.